Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to be breaking down exactly how to eat to build muscle and lose body fat because I find nutrition is so misunderstood because of how much information there is out there. There's great information, of course, there's bad information, and because of that, a lot of people make pretty massive mistakes when it comes to structuring their diet. Some people fall into the camp of eating too much and then they end up gaining unnecessary body fat. Others eat way too little and hinder their muscle growth potential. And others do things like cut carbs way too aggressively or don't get enough protein. And as a result, they fail to see any progress or at least anywhere near the progress they're capable of. So, in this episode, we're going to quite literally go over everything you need to know about structuring your diet for maximum muscle growth while staying lean and maximum muscle retention while getting lean. So we're going to start with protein, how much you need, the best sources, and then how to adjust it depending on whether you're in a gaining phase or a bulk or a fat loss phase. Then we'll break down fats, why they're absolutely critical for hormone production, overall health, and then how to balance them into your diet. And then after that, we'll dive into carbohydrates, the best fuel for muscle growth and performance, how to set them up based on your goal, and then why you should never really eliminate them from your diet. We'll also go over the importance of food quality and digestion, the role of micronutrients, and how to make adjustments based on your results. So, starting with protein, which is the foundation of any muscle building diet, any physique related diet, really, and it is the most important macronutrient when it comes to muscle repair, recovery, of course, growth. So, without enough protein, you won't recover properly and you'll struggle to build or maintain muscle, especially when dieting. So, the ideal protein intake should be around 1 to 1.5 grams per pound of lean body weight, with the upper range being particularly beneficial during fat loss phases when hunger is higher and muscle retention is a priority. The key thing to remember with protein, though, is that the protein requirements change depending on your phase. Let's say during a bulking phase, when carbohydrate intake is high, which we want it to be, protein needs can be slightly lower because carbohydrates are protein sparing. That basically means when the body has plenty of carbohydrates available for energy, it doesn't have to rely on protein as much. However, during a fat loss phase when you're dieting, when carbohydrates are reduced, protein intake should go up potentially to help preserve muscle mass and keep hunger under control. And something very important to note is that not all protein sources are created equal. So the best approach is to focus on high quality, direct protein sources that are bioavailable. So we're talking sources like whey, protein, red meat, eggs, chicken, turkey, fish, yogurt, salmon. And these are important because they provide the essential amino acids, the full spectrum of amino acids that then support muscle protein synthesis and also give us micronutrients alongside, which are absolutely critical for overall health. You're only going to adapt to the degree you are healthy. Next, we have fats, which are super important for hormone production. I learned that the hard way back in the day. Cell function, and of course, overall just health and your body's ability to function. But fats often get neglected for some reason. You hear a ton about protein and carbs, but never really about fats. But they play such an important role in any well structured diet. So the ideal fat intake should be set somewhere between zero point 0.3 to 0.7 grams per pound of body weight, depending on a person's needs and goals as well as preferences as well. During a muscle building phase, let's say, or bulk, fat intake can stay moderate, especially on training days when carbohydrate intake is high. On rest days, I like to set things up where our fat intake is typically increased slightly while carbohydrates come down since the need for carbs is lower on a rest day. Now, in a fat loss phase, fats will naturally have to come down as your calories drop, but they should absolutely never be eliminated entirely from your diet because, like I said, I learned the hard way, your hormones will crash, speaking from personal experience, and the quality of the fat sources is also just as important as the quantity. So getting your fats from sources like eggs, wild salmon, nuts like almonds, walnuts, macadamia nuts, Brazil nuts, extra virgin olive oil, avocados, and those are a pretty wide range and are all my favorites. They also help reduce inflammation and very much support overall recovery. Now, if you want to perform at your best in the gym and build muscle efficiently, carbohydrates need to be a priority. They are your body's preferred fuel source, and trying to gain muscle without them is a big mistake. People often think like they need to cut carbs to stay lean or follow the meat and fruit diet. But if the reality is, if you train hard, you need carbs to drive intensity, fuel your nervous system, fuel your muscle performance, and recovery, and replenish glycogen stores. So, the best way to approach structuring your carbohydrate intake is to first you set your protein and fat intake, and then fill the remaining of the calories in your goal, in your calorie goal, with carbohydrates. If the goal is muscle growth, carbohydrate intake should be higher to support training performance and recovery. If the goal is fat loss, that's when you can adjust carbs lower and still keep your protein and fat set, but they should strategically be placed around your training, which is at the utmost importance in a deficit to maintain your strength and performance, which will signal to your body like, hey, let's keep this muscle around. So when it comes to carbohydrate sources, we very simply want to pick ones that digest well for you. So as an individual, you'll know what foods you get on with, what foods you don't. But some of my favorite carbohydrate sources are just like jasmine rice, the usual sushi rice. I love white potatoes. I love sweet potatoes. Fruits are amazing. Cream of rice is great for, especially when your carbohydrate intake gets very high. If you're someone that needs to push, let's say above 3,000, getting close to 4,000 calories, which is a very minute amount of people if they're truly accurately on point, unless you have an extreme amount of muscle mass. But things like dried fruit can come into play, organic fruit juices, and I'm a big fan of sourdough bread as well. And actually, a combination of glucose-based carbs and fructose from fruit can actually improve carbohydrate intake. So it makes it a pretty smart addition to any diet. And one thing we can do with our carbohydrate intake that is an effective strategy for managing body composition is called carbohydrate cycling. And this just means adjusting your carbohydrate based on your training demands. So you're just going to have higher carbs on intense training days, lower carbs on potentially a lighter training day or rest days. Now, what this will do is it'll help maintain insulin sensitivity, it'll optimize glycogen replenishment, and it'll support muscle recovery when we need it most while keeping calorie intake the same. So it's a cool little hack you can do for fat loss. Periodizing carbohydrate intake using high and low days is incredibly effective as well. For example, let's say you place higher carb days around big muscle group workouts like your legs or a back day or like a pull day, or on days where you're training a specific body part you're looking to bring up, you could do that as well. That's when carbohydrate cycling can come into play. And will it have a dramatic difference on your overall physique and performance? No, but do the 1% 100% add up. So with that said, setting up your macros is just one piece of the puzzle. Simply hitting your protein, carb, and fat targets won't guarantee optimal results if your digestion is poor and your body isn't absorbing nutrients efficiently. So this is where food quality matters. So you're prioritizing those sources we went through, the whole nutrient dense foods, over excessive processed food intake, and making sure you're doing that consistently so your body is functioning optimally, which will lead to all things positive: better recovery, better energy levels, and of course improved muscle growth, improved fat loss because there's less inflammation. So we cannot forget about micronutrients, which play a pretty massive role in optimizing your metabolism specifically, muscle function, recovery, not to mention your overall quality of life and how you show up day to day, your mood, because it plays a role in neurotransmitter synthesis, so your motivation. Now we can break these down one by one. I want to cover a couple important ones just so you understand the importance of the quality of your diet and hitting your micronutrient needs. So magnesium, a staple. Astonishing amount of people are deficient. It's key for hydration, muscle relaxation, and then sleep quality, which downstream will impact quite literally everything we're after. Zinc and vitamin D are essential for hormone production, specifically testosterone. There's studies that show if you have low testosterone and you have low zinc, if you replete your zinc status, you will get an increase in testosterone, which is pretty cool. So make sure you're on top of your zinc. Now, I could go on and on about more examples of, let's say, B vitamins and fat loss and selenium, iodine, and zinc for thyroid function, but you got to get the picture there. So the next part too is proper hydration, which is a non-negotiable if you want to make optimal results. You need your electrolytes like sodium, potassium, magnesium to regulate fluid balance, muscle contractions, nerve function, because without them, your performance will suffer. And it's not just physical performance, it's mental performance as well. So if being productive is important to you, hydration status plays a massive role into that as well. There's also one way too commonly overlooked aspect of nutrition, which is digestive health. If your digestion is not on point, more specifically, if it's not functioning well, even the most perfectly structured diet will not deliver you maximal results. Okay, so you're not what you eat. I bet you heard that statement, you are what you eat. You are what you eat, assimilate, and absorb. Okay, so poor gut health can absolutely lead to, first, obviously, symptoms like bloating, gas, distension, but also poor recovery, nutrient deficiencies because you're not absorbing those nutrients, even a negative impact on hormone status, potentially your mood because the gut does play a role in neurotransmitters, which all don't align with better results. So I want to give you some very simple tools, some very simple things you can do within your diet to support your digestion. So very simply, you can incorporate probiotics from fermented foods. That's an easy thing to do. Yogurt, kimchi, sauerkraut. Second big one, getting adequate fiber intake. This is a big one. And then, of course, making sure you have variety in your diet. So often there's a big mistake that gets made where, especially if you're meal prepping, if you're busy, you just eat the same exact things every single day. Now, while that's great, you may be eating whole, single ingredient, nutrient dense foods. Eating the same thing over and over will potentially lead to a gut issue because you're not giving your gut the diversity and the variety it needs. So, very simple thing to do is just make sure you're switching up your food options, let's say every week. So, every week when you go to the grocery store, just switch up your carbohydrate sources, switch up your protein sources, switch up more specifically, your fruit and veg sources. So, you are giving your gut microbiome the diversity it needs to therefore thrive. Then, of course, avoiding ultra processed foods because they do damage your gut, which will then play a role into inflammation, which will then lead to a bunch of other downstream negative health outcomes that we obviously want to avoid, that are not going to help us build our physique in any way. And then stress management is a big one as well because that plays a massive role in your gut health. So at the end of the day, the most important thing when structuring a diet is setting up macros correctly and then adjusting them based on results. But also not neglecting your micronutrients because calories determine your weight. It's pretty straightforward. Energy in versus energy out. Macros determine what you look like at that weight, and then micros determine how you feel and how you function at that weight. And it can be easily argued that they also impact how you look downstream because of their impact on various hormone functions. Like, say, if you're low on zinc and you replete that zinc status, do you think you're going to look better with higher testosterone than you would otherwise? If you have low thyroid function because you're deficient in selenium and iodine, and because of that, you have to eat very little calories on your diet, do you think you're going to look better when you replete that selenium iodine status and then are now able to eat more calories? Now you're able to fuel your training better, recover from more. So, food for thought. And that is my complete guide on how to eat to build muscle and lose body fat. I hope you enjoyed. If you want your nutrition done for you, you can click the first link in the description and it'll also give you 2 free training plans to choose from, then a ton of other actionable advice to help you transform not only your physique, which is the priority, but your health and performance because they're tied to it, and ultimately unlock your full potential. Peace.